On this episode, we sit down with Keith Robinson, who started off as an AI skeptic, but has become a true believer.
Welcome to the show, where AI takes the floor. Lee and Rich on the mic, ready to explore.
Welcome to the AI Guys podcast, where we make artificial intelligence easy to understand for everyone. I'm your host, Lee Dixon, and as always, I'm joined by the man who has very little to say, but loves to say it anyway, Rich Swire. How's it going,
That's
man?
funny. That's a good one. I like you. Did you practice that in front of a mirror this morning?
I've been standing there being like, I've ripped on your hats, which I can't today because of our guest.
Damn right you can't.
I've ripped on
This is
the
my-
fact that you've worn a black shirt, I think, for 95% of our episodes.
That's a sign of genius, by the way. Einstein
Thank you.
only wear one
Thank
colored
you.
shirt
Thank you.
so
Yeah.
that he could have his brain free to focus on other things. So
Whatever we need to
This
tell
is why
ourselves.
Keith is a guest today.
Yeah, exactly. We need to bring in someone to
Yeah.
pull some punches.
He's countering all these, the ribbing I have to take on this show is.
I got
is-
Yeah,
your
we're
back.
not. You're not going to make me the villain here. It's not going to
It's
happen.
abusive.
Yeah,
got your back.
But as we are alluding to, joining us today, we have a 26-year veteran in residential real estate tech. At one point, was running the 19th largest real estate company in the world. Co-host of the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Was an AI skeptic. Now he's turned advocate. Keith Robinson, welcome to the pod.
Yeah, all that's true somehow. Thank you very much. Happy to be here and be the protector of Rich in this environment.
Thank you. Yeah,
I mean, you are dressed in a similar bouncer-esque. So I get it.
If I could, my goal is to just get to where I can wear a black t-shirt every day.
Essentially, if I just took my hat off and shaved my head, we could be twins, basically.
Yeah, you'd
Right?
be like the cute one.
You're like a better looking, smarter version of me.
I definitely know the second one isn't true, and the first one is also debatable.
I'm kind of missing the fact that I don't have black framed glasses. If I would have pulled that off, like this would have been,
Take this a hint, Lee, that you need to upgrade your wardrobe.
Yeah, or just enjoy your perfect eyesight. Maybe that.
Yeah, 2020, baby, let's go.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons we wanted to have you on, Keith, is because I think today we really want to focus on kind of keeping this more of an open forum. A lot of times we come in with certain topics, we want to dive in deep, and I think with you, we can cover a lot about your AI story and how you've kind of traversed this landscape from that fad phase. I think a lot of people are getting into with so much new tech kind of booming during COVID to where you're now actually utilizing AI in your daily business.
Yeah. First of all, thank you for having me on. I'm a huge fan of your podcast.
First and only. Let's go.
No, I listen to every episode. It's part of how I'm trying to think about and process AI and understand how it's going to influence residential real estate and or the world.
Awesome,
and
man.
You guys do it in a way that a lay person like myself can really understand. So keep doing the good work.
We'll send you your check in the mail for that nice,
do it.
That good plug. I appreciate it.
Do it. I'll keep saying it if you're sending money. So for me, this all started as, I guess I am by nature a bit of a skeptic, and we get inundated with these hype cycles, right? So there, just to name a few of the most recent ones, there was cryptocurrency and or blockchain that was supposed to revolutionize the world. Still may, right? Still may. We'll see. There was the metaverse where you could buy a house on fake land in some place next to Snoop Dogg and go hang out with him and go to an Ariana Grande concert or whatever, right? And we keep getting, there was the internet. I was around when that was invented. That's how old I am. Then there was a bunch of stuff that never came to fruition. Then there was mobile, which was the last big one, right? And then there was a bunch of stuff that's never come to fruition. So the AI wave was washing over me, and I was like, is this bullshit or not? I need to know. And I'm a tactile learner. I prefer to experience something to really know if to determine if I think it's real or not. And so I started trying to think about, well, how can I tinker with and play with AI to try to determine the veracity of it for me when I'm thinking about the businesses that I'm involved in and how to prepare them for the future and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
So I actually reached out, shameless plug. I'm not just saying this because he's on this podcast with me, but I reached out to the two of you, Rich specifically, because he was on our podcast, the podcast that I am a co-host of, and talked to us about AI. And he's one of the smartest people I know, especially on this topic. And he's like, no, yeah. He helped me understand where it was in time and place. And I have a long fix and flip and ground up construction background. I've pretty much ever since I've been in real estate, I've either represented investors or been an investor myself. And so that was an easy place for me to say, okay, well, maybe we could build a flip finder bot that could have the initial conversation in and around evaluating a potential property off of the MLS or that's out there in the world being marketed as for sale, and start that conversation with AI. Because if there are 400 potential properties, who is most interested, who is most likely to listen, who is willing to receive a offer from a residential real estate investor, which, as we know, is just real estate code for lowball, right? Like, I want to send a low offer. Will you let me?
Yep.
And that was the area in which I thought we could go play and understand. And Rich and you both were kind enough to allow me the sandbox to get to go play in. And so I really went from pretty skeptical. Like, I guess I'm not skeptical. It's just like, is it
it's
so
the burnout
early?
though?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And
The hype cycles and all that stuff. I mean, Rich and I have kind of talked to it ad nauseum in some of these episodes, but like, it does turn into just like, oh great, like, what is this thing? You know, like, there might be legs behind it, but like, do you really have the energy or the brain like space to just be like, cool, let me go all in on this now? And I think that's one thing that we're trying to do with this podcast, and why we talk about AI the way we do, is it's like, you don't have to dive into a pool without knowing how to swim.
Totally. And what I love that you guys are doing on your episodes is you're really helping people understand that there's nuance to the AI conversation, right?
Yeah.
Like, AI sort of gets lumped in and we call everything AI, right? And even just sometimes there's no artificial or intelligence. It's just triggers, right? Like, this happens, then you send this, right?
Yep.
That's not AI, right? That's trigger-based response marketing or whatever. And then most people, when they think about AI, or when they're afraid of AI, or when they're freaked out about AI, it's, Terminator, true artificial intelligence, where the robots are going to rule the world. And I just didn't know, and I wanted to know. So that's how I stepped in to just like, okay, where's a safe place of residential real estate where I have some expertise that I could go and create, and it's not going to impact my real estate operation. It's not going to impact any of my businesses that I'm involved in. It's just this little corner of residential real estate where I could go play. So if anybody's listening and thinking about it, I would recommend that you don't think of it in terms of the complexity of it. Pick one small piece of your business or something outside your business that you have expertise in, and just try to figure out how you could overlay AI across that to have an experience with it. Because for me, that was really, really eye-opening. That's great.
That's great advice, because I think what I loved about the idea, or the company obviously you already had, but the idea around how you could leverage AI is you kind of took a practical approach, which is, I think, is what's lacking in the conversation. That anytime you're talking about AI, which does typically center around the ChatGPT experience, but then it kind of gets very technical very quickly. And, and then people are starting to use acronyms and concepts and talk about things that are maybe not possible today, but maybe in 10 years, but what I love about, when you approached us with kind of your idea, it was just super practical, and it came from a business need, right? Like you said, I could have somebody do this, but it's going to cost me money, and I don't want to. The reason why I'm not doing it really is because it's going to cost me, I don't
time and money.
Exactly, time and money. But I do think it's going to be a worthwhile additive to my business, especially if it's something that's, like on the side, or a different venture, or like, as you mentioned, something that's not necessarily in your core to core day to day, where you have to be disruptive. And so that's what I loved about what you're approaching, because, three things that your application did, which most people don't necessarily understand is possible, is one, it is the AI itself is doing the outreach, right? So you're providing, just as if you were to hire an employee, you're saying, hey, here's a list of homes that we're potentially acquirers for, see if they're actually interested in, or where they are, or where's their mindset as far as where they think the value is, and and if they would be open to offer from an investor or from a flipper.
Yeah.
And so that proactive component, is super important, because obviously that's where the work starts. And then as the AI has a conversation, again, without having any sort of manual, no need for any sort of manual operations or a person to help watch it. The AI has been trained to kind of take your expertise and basically mimic, just as if you were to train somebody, say, hey, what are the questions Keith typically asks, and what are the answers he gives, and what else does this bot need to understand, or this AI agent need to understand, in order to have a very fluid conversation with this real estate agent. And I see the conversations coming across, and it's somewhat, it's kind of surreal, because you're like, you're looking at it like it's a chat, but then you're like, you have this aha moment, even though obviously we work with it every day. You're like, oh wait, that AI is actually, working the deal. They're actually, the AI is
wheeling and dealing.
So it's really, that's what I love about the use case, is it's practical, and it quickly can be seen as like, oh, that's one of probably millions of roles or tasks or whatever you want to call it, that AI can kind of plug into. And I think that's a great place for people to start. And so like, go ahead.
Maybe I'll frame up quickly, just like exactly what I remember reaching out to. So I do some investing in residential real estate, have a private money bank that it's really a hobby more than a business, but it's used to fund projects for myself, projects for other people that I know that do fix and flip and ground up construction. If you're in that world, one of the hardest parts, there's two hard parts to doing fix and flip or ground up construction. It's finding the deal and finding the money. Well, I had the money part taken care of, and finding the deal is the other hard part.
Yeah.
And when I used to flip houses for a living, I would jump on the MLS. I would cull through hundreds and hundreds of properties. I would identify potential properties that I felt like fit my buy box and made sense. And then I would do outreach to those residential real estate professionals and ask them if they'd be interested in text, call, email, whatever. And if you talk to enough of them, some of them say yes. There's always someone. What I loved about properties on the MLS or properties that were on the portal or whatever, they've raised their hand and said, I'm willing to sell my house, which is a big first step. Yeah. Finding off-market deals are great, but I wanted to play in an area where there were available properties. Someone's raised their hand and said, I want to sell it. And so when I reached out to Rich about it, and to you, Lee, what was brilliant is you guys already have built a bot that's really good at talking to people about houses, right?
Yeah.
So it's built to handle online leads, and someone reaches out about 123 Elm Street, and it was really good at having a conversation with a human being about a house. So I only had to teach it how to talk about, instead of talking to a consumer, it's talking to a real estate agent, slightly nuanced conversation. And instead of talking about it as a buyer, I'm talking about it as an investor. So we trained it in, I don't know, a couple weeks, Rich, something like that.
Yeah.
And so from idea to the first text going out, it was maybe 3 weeks or a month. And I'm probably the problem for 2 of those weeks because I didn't get something back in time. So it was a great way for me to go, okay, this is going to be fun, because it's either going to fall on its face and say a bunch of stupid stuff that's wrong, and then I'll be like, see, told you it was bullshit. Or it's going to not do that, and I'll have some experience.
Yeah.
And I was blown away from the first batch of texts that we sent out, right? And yes, did it have some hallucinations? Yes, it did. There mistakes were made. Whenever people talk about those or point those out, it always makes me laugh, because I always say, well, your employees make mistakes every day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, your employees are far from perfect. And oh, by the way, so are you. So like, of course it's going to make some mistakes along the way. Yeah. Every new hire does. That's part of new hires.
Yeah.
Right?
I want to pause there just for a second. And if it's okay, I want to jump in.
Yeah, please.
That to me was one of the things that I think, really drives home AI as an application to the business, and not just this magical thing that just exists, right? Is the fact that there is a progression. And luckily we did have, because of our experience in like the residential real estate space and where we were building some of these initial tools, we found that, you had to come in and give it some scripting, and it went out, and you were very impressed with basically what it knew. And then there was tweaking and training and adjustments. And then the next sets of things and conversations that are happening are way better than that. And it comes down to kind of this refinement cycle until it gets to a point where it feels really good. It's the exact same thing if I were to go out today and hire somebody. I'm not going to just give them a script, put them on the phone and be like, this is what you do, bang out calls, because they're going to end up either one, getting fatigued from that and then making mistakes, or two, just being like, how do I cut a corner and do this in a different way that's not this exact script? And AI does a really great job of understanding the end goal, taking the scripting and then say, well, I'll just handle this dynamically. Like I will continue the conversation. If I get veered off, I can always come back to it, but I can control where the consumer is trying to go, or the end user if I'm talking to a business or a real estate agent in this case. And I think that's something that people forget about a lot with AI is it's not supposed to be perfect out of the box. It is supposed to be something that learns along the way.
I'll add two more things to that. One is, I had this similar conversation, and your point is dead on, Keith, which is, when AI is like no different, I guess we're trying to make AI more human, and humans make mistakes. But what's really interesting, and I was talking to a client the other day about this, is like, we were talking about the same thing. And I said, the difference too is employees are making mistakes and you have no idea they are making those mistakes.
Right.
Yeah.
So they might be saying all kinds of stuff. I have no idea what my sales team says to customers.
I promise if you received a transcript of every phone call that your employees made, I receive a transcript of these text threads with the AI bot, you would freak out.
Exactly. So what's cool about it is when you do see a mistake, at least you can see it, the AI, what they said, and then you can go back and, as Lee pointed out,
teaching moment.
Train it and say, hey, next time you ask this question, it's really what it's really doing is showing you the gaps of training that you haven't yet applied. So in reality, it's actually more of a reflection of the lack of training that we gave the AI. And you don't really get that kind of feedback loop from an employee typically. And the other thing is AI is extraordinarily coachable. It has no attitude. When you go to AI and say, hey, that was a really bad answer, you almost lost the deal. You need to answer this different. They don't go, oh, Keith, man, he's always he's a micromanager. What a jerk. He thinks he knows everything.
They're
I'm not listening
saving
to
that memory for the uprising. They're going to be like, I remember how you talked to me.
Yeah.
Be kind to your AI just in case.
So even though it is super coachable and obviously trainable, I think the point is really well taken, which is it might have in the beginning a couple of flaws similar to what a human would have, but just they're obviously more apparent because you can actually see it. And then secondarily, super easy to fix without having any sort of ego or anything else involved. So I think that's fascinating about the difference.
Yeah. And I had to do some things for my own psychology of being worried about looking stupid. Right. So I live in Northern California in the Bay Area. I went to the Fresno market for a test. I don't know any real estate professionals there, very few. And it wasn't like I was going to accidentally have my bot send a text. It's so I was a normal person. I'm worried about how this is going to make me look. All the fears everyone is having about plugging in AI. I tried to create a sandbox where I felt safe. And so we did a bunch of outreach, and once someone, I don't know, the agent said, I think it'll be a little bit until we hear back the clients in Spain. And the AI thought that the agent was going to Spain. So it said, oh, have a great vacation, right? Sure, those mistakes are going to happen.
Right.
But I also have had people test the AI and just randomly text it ADU in the middle of a conversation out of context, which they would never do, right? Or maybe it was a typo. I don't know what happened. But the bot was, the answer was great. It was oh, is there an accessory dwelling unit attached to this property? It picked up on it immediately, knew what that person was talking about outside of context, and responded with an appropriate real estate response for what they received. Yeah. It was, I'm consistently surprised. We've gone from sending it in a city where I don't know anybody, so I feel safe, to now we're doing this in 5 counties between Fresno and Napa, where we're ingesting data and starting to push these conversations out. And we're writing offers now on properties that would have never made it to just the field of vision for us. Because look, let's be honest. My girlfriend's a real estate agent. I have been a licensed real estate agent. I love real estate agents, and most of them aren't going to get up every day and send 25 texts to potential property. They're not going to do it every day, day in, day out, every single day without fail, right? And that's sort of what it takes to find the needle in the haystack for finding an opportunity to write an offer on.
Yep.
So for me, the experience has gone from pretty... I mean, I was curious and hopeful, but was like, this is just the next stupid thing that they tell us to scare us or to click on something and read an article, right?
Hold on, let me get my tinfoil out.
Yeah. Like there are real business applications. I think if you can scale it down in your mind and get it away from this artificial general intelligence that's going to be the assistant in your pocket and answer every question you're ever going to ask it. Someone's going to build that and they're going to make $1 billion, and that's awesome, right? I'm just trying to figure out how to make tens of millions of dollars so I can retire. So, and for me, it was simple problem, simple solution, have AI execute, because even if it's imperfect, daily imperfect execution will be slightly more perfect execution done infrequently.
Yeah, and that's exactly.
Yeah,
that's you said it brilliantly there, and I'll just restate it. But I think in the context of kind of, we talked about hype cycle, which is how we started this conversation, is, adoption is, if there is a hype cycle, or if there's this like people who are like thinking that this might be a hype cycle, that's probably the biggest enemy for the adoption today. Because exactly what you're outlined there is what we face every day when we talk to businesses. Is like, they have this grandiose vision of whatever that might look like in their mind, which has been obviously, a combination of watching Hollywood movies to reading TechCrunch and watching Sam Altman or whatever. But the bottom line is, if you just took 3 steps backward and said, all right, let's just boil down to like one thing, like something that's very simple, but requires some level of a human conversation. Yeah. It's amazing how you can start taking these 5-minute tasks and automating them. And you just took one specific task of an entire, arc of a business. But now that you've actually kind of got familiarity with it, you're more comfortable. You understand what it's capable of. Now you can say, now you can actually see, okay, if you have a different task that has a similar issue where you need a human, but you don't have somebody on staff to do it, and you can obviously train an AI to do something completely different, but the same type of user behavior. Now you're starting to get there. And then you'll wake up one day and you might have, this is what we believe, is businesses will have tens, if not hundreds, of agents that are doing all these different tasks, automating, helping either as a co-pilot, helping people be better at their job, or doing more, getting more out of their day-to-day, or perhaps even doing some really amazing, cool stuff that, wasn't possible before. So I think
I've even to expound on that a little bit, Rich, and I know we've talked about this loosely, but like I'm whiteboarding and journaling about, the initial data set I pulled was aged inventory. Properties have been on the market 60 to 90 days and longer. They've slipped through the cracks for whatever reason. I made sure they weren't in rural areas. They were areas where I would actually want to buy. So once I did a little bit of data scrubbing, then I turn it over to the AI and let it rip. The conversation should be different for something that has just hit the market, right? That conversation should be nuanced. And so I'm tinkering in my journal and on my whiteboard about, how would I want to script and work with an AI to talk about a just released property that fits my buy box, right? And that's too... I'm not going to have one bot that does both of those conversations, because they're different conversations. So it's a real world example is, I'll have what I'm referring to in my brain as a rapid response AI bot to find fix and flips. And I've got a aged inventory bot to help me find fix and flips. And then maybe I'll have one bot to kind of run them both, right? And go, okay, we haven't, this conversation was 14 days ago, or there's some status change in the MLS or something like that. And so now that requires a different conversation. So there'll be like a boss bot, I guess, that's sort of the intellect for which one to turn on and which one to turn off and how to turn them on. But I really think if you can start to segment a business problem, and not your biggest business problem, because your biggest business problem, you're going to be too scared, right? So, and really think about like one simple executable. If you send a text on a regular basis to someone, or an email on a regular basis, then this can be a leveler to help you solve it. And for me, I've gone from skeptic to believer, and I'm trying, and working on a support bot for our real estate operation that can answer number one question we get asked is, what's my login and password? And I have a US based call center that answers that question every day. Like they would love to not answer that question anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Sure.
Right. And then I start and to me, it's not even about like, oh, because I know this gets thrown in a lot. Like, oh, great. Then I can fire 2 people. No. I have 2 really great human beings who are highly trained on my business, who now can do outreach to my top 50 offices and really support my primary revenue stream at a higher level, while I'm letting the AI handle some of the mundanity or the more simple questions. Like, I don't want to fire anybody. Right. I want them focused on providing a better experience for the stakeholders in my business. So
Keith's walking in with white linen preaching the gospel of AI, and everyone is just like,
yeah. And I mean, and those people that were doing those kind of remedial tasks, those 5-minute, 10-minute tasks that are now automated, can also, there's going to be this wide open role of them learning and understanding how to train more AI agents. You kind of outlined exactly the architecture, I think, of what every business is going to have to face in the next year, 5 years, 10 years, which is, I'm going to have to start looking at AI agents to automate specific things. And there's going to be a non-zero amount of prompting, which is kind of what you were talking about before with like those houses that come onto market today. There's a different prompt and a different Q&A session that's going to be trained for that AI to talk to that, versus something that's maybe 60, 90, 120 days on market.
Right.
And so what you're really talking about there is understanding and taking your expertise in your head and putting in sort of prompts that are training these AIs. And then on the other side, training doesn't stop, right? So your support agents are still going to have to be updated and required to know what's going on and what else is they need to understand. So, I always say, like, one of the biggest job opportunities, I think, in any field right now, especially if you're just kind of looking at AI, not from a technical or a developer perspective, or even from a business owner perspective, but as an employee. If you're an employee of a company, you should be learning and understanding how to train or prompt. And you can start with ChatGPT as your primary interface, but there are levels that as you get better and better at prompting and training, you are going to be invaluable, because what ends up happening, and it's almost like exactly the same for every company that we've worked with, is you start off with a use case like yours, in the case of following up with, or reaching out, and then you quickly hit a wall of, I got to teach this thing what it needs to know and how to act, and I also need to give it some basic training information. And what's scary is most businesses, if you ask most businesses, like, hey, if you were to hire a person, how would you train them? And they go, oh, well, they would just kind of like,
they shadow Jim. And
exactly.
No.
We don't have any documentation about our business whatsoever. And by the way, nobody can get access to all this information, and it's in the heads of 50 people.
Right.
So I think over the next 5 years, we talk about hype cycle, we talk about what's real and what's not real, and why there is going to be a slow uptick of AI being implemented at any serious level. I think at least for the next 5 years, is that you still have this massive amount of knowledge transfer that has to happen, not just from people who work, knowledge workers, but people who know all the details of how things work. That all needs to be translated into some sort of center database, which an AI can work off of. And then all those processes, whether they stay the same or maybe they're optimized or maybe they're flipped around a little bit from management, are also going to have to kind of trickle down into these AI agents. So it's going to take time to roll out. I mean, if you look at SaaS as kind of a comparison, like where people started to evolve from, installing software on a CD, like what we used to do back in the day.
Let's go back to floppy, Rich. It's okay.
To like the days of Salesforce and all these new SaaS products, it took 10, 15 years for a lot. And still today, businesses are still adopting into and installing and implementing these SaaS products in their organization, because it just takes that much time for any organization, more than 5 people, to do anything really. And so AI is no different and will follow that same path. I think the only thing that really would accelerate it is like, and then you mentioned this, is that there are certain use cases, and I think it's brilliant what you said, and I'm going to steal it, which is, start with something like so remedial and almost like just a function, and then don't go for the big stuff. Don't try to, just go for something simple. Because I think like you said, it only took you a few weeks, and then suddenly your eyes were open. You're like, oh, I see how this works now. Because until you see it working, until you actually like feel it, touch it, and go, oh, and you within that, you're also seeing its limitations, right? And and so you're like, okay, now I know how to use this as a tool, right? Until you see somebody swing a hammer, hit a nail, and you're like, what is this thing? It's so misshaped. It's so weird. How do I hold it, right? So I really appreciate that insight, because I think a lot of the people who are struggling with, where do I start? I think you start with, let's just take one simple little use case.
Small.
Literally draw it out on a napkin and just put AI in the middle and say, all right, if AI can do this, and I do this 100 times a month, and it takes me 5 minutes, I can quickly do and it's worth my time to do, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think most of the people that I talk to have one of two experiences in their brain when it comes to AI. It's either, oh, no, that's the end of the world, bro. Right. And so I'd love for you to help, other than like movies and psychology. And what I always say to them is like, no one makes movies about how AI works out. That's not a good movie, right? It's a pretty boring movie to make a movie about how AI is okay and the world's fine, right? Yeah. So if you're going to make a movie about it, it's going to be AI going crazy. But it's either that, or they want the sort of Uber bot that's going to solve all of my problems.
Yeah,
and it's either the end of the world, or it's it doesn't fix everything.
Full utopia.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And
I think
how do you push through that when you're talking to people?
Honestly, I think the answer to that is the same answer in a weird way. The answer is this: is that the world, the way it works, the way it operates, and us as human beings, us as organizations, whether it's a company, whether it's a family, whether it's a university, and all the systems that we've created over the last 50, 60 years is extraordinarily complex and extraordinarily difficult to unwind.
Right.
Whether you're AI or not. So you're not going to get an Uber bot that's going to know or be able to do all these things because of the mess that we've made. Even just within our organization, like you have a bigger company than we do, but like even within our organization, we probably have 8 different SaaS products that are all kind of talking to each other, and really no reason for it to be that complicated. It's just the cards that we're dealt, right? So in order for us to even have AI understand how to talk to all those systems in the way that we want to, it just takes work, right? And you can imagine it's exponentially more difficult when you're talking about a large Fortune 500 company. And then 2, as far as like so that's just like, you're not going to get really the extreme of this utopian bot, and you're not going to get this extreme of this like Terminator bot, because same problem. For you to really have true impact and, either do extraordinarily positive things or extraordinarily negative things, you still have to have efficiency, and you still have to be connected and be able to do things autonomously. And so the only way that AI can, in my personal opinion, that can really cause harm is if a human allows it, purposely or non-purposely, right?
Or so builds it to do that.
So we still have to, it's still the same thing if you're just talking about, like a knife. You can say, give it to the right human, they're going to cut up their steak, and it makes their, it allows them to enjoy their meal better. Give it to a different person, they might start chasing people around and threatening to kill them, right? So it really does come down to us as humans and where we see the best potential. And that's kind of how I look at AI, is where is the potential of what it can do. But I don't foresee any of these extreme outcomes, because there are so many layers of complexity and bureaucracy and complications that even the smartest AI in the world, it's kind of ironic, but would have a hard time even thinking like a human, because we're weirdos. Yeah, we just make
too many levels to it.
There's really no reason for any of the things that we do in our world. This is probably a whole nother podcast, but I mean, we got to get Keith back on, but like, we could literally sit here and talk about every aspect of the human race. And I think AI would be like, what, why do you, so like, so it would have a hard time even understanding or, reverse engineering why we do the things we do.
I think too, people, I guess age, since we talked about how old I am earlier before we started this podcast, I remember being on AOL, and it took, to download a photo, I would start when I headed to bed, and I would hope that it would download overnight, right? And that was a long time ago. It's taken a really long time now to where I'm streaming, thousands of movies at my fingertips, and I spend most of my TV time trying to figure out what to watch instead of actually watching anything, right? And so, it doesn't just, the evolution of technology is, there is an evolutionary cycle, and it takes a long time, and there's the ability to course correct along the way. And while I understand the science fiction thought experiment about out of control intelligence, it's great for books and films, but we're so far away from that. Like we're still at the takes overnight to download photos. We're nowhere near the streaming thousands of movies right now.
One thing too that when you were asking earlier, kind of like between these two ends of the spectrum, right? Like where things are, we're in that disruption phase, and not from like a negative piece. It's just that something is different. And Rich has used this example on other things that you can't, when I go on to look for a house, right? And I go to Zillow, like there is an experience that now is ingrained in this process that we are as humans accustomed to. AI is something that is disrupting certain aspects of our life and how we do things, which of course is going to create some pushback, or at least some, I don't want to do it that way because I'm still doing it this way. But now you fast forward 12 and 18 months and people are utilizing ChatGPT as a Google search because they feel like the responses that they're getting from that are a little bit more refined because of how they ask the question and not just a paid ad kind of pushing it in.
Well, and we don't want links, we want answers. Yeah. Right.
So
so it's a better experience.
Exactly. Yeah. So you have this piece right now where there's going to be ends of that spectrum, but a lot of that starts to come to a head quickly because of the disruption and someone being like, this feels different. Why is it different? I don't like different. And then now that's where kind of people draw lines in the sand.
Yeah. I mean, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah,
well, I wasn't around then, but when the printing press was invented, people were freaking out because now everyone was. I've just read about it. But people were freaking out. Like, what do you mean? Everyone's going to have books? Because books were only the purview of the incredibly wealthy. And right? Like,
and they also said, what's the point of having a printing press and giving people books that don't know how to read?
Exactly.
So it's like, well, yeah, but the only way they learn how to read is if they have
some books, right?
Like we're no different in that. This is exactly where we are with all technology. It has that same issue, right?
Yeah.
Well, how possibly could AI help improve the world if it hallucinates about, historical facts? And you're like, like this is like it's technology. We get through that.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
I will say, I don't think. I mean, I know there's quotes everywhere right now. If you go anywhere down the rabbit hole, right? I don't think AI is going to replace people. I think people empowered by AI are going to kick the shit out of the people who don't figure it out, right? Like your comfort level, your facility with it, the way you're thinking about it, how you're plugging it into your daily life and how you're plugging it into your business will just make you more efficient and effective. And you will beat the people who
refuse it. Yeah,
absolutely. Right. That's definitely true for the next, at least for, it's definitely generationally true. So I would say that anybody who's in the workforce today, that will be their primary experience for the next 50 years. And I think that is all really we should be concerned about in making sure that, because there is a, and we'll end with this concept because I think it's a great way to end. Thank you for that. When you think about AI and its potential, and of course we've focused primarily today on the work side of things, right? The business side of things. But I mean, at the end of the day, what its real potential is giving us back time, right? So time is the most valuable asset that any one of us have. And if you center the conversation around that and say, can AI give me back time? Because time is something I can then reallocate to something I would rather do, like passion project, or to my family, or to myself. And, we've lost that because we've been in a time deficit for the last 20 years because unfortunately the internet brought us this beautiful thing called social media, and which plays on our human instincts to want to talk and share. And even if nobody's listening, AKA this podcast is a great example of that. But I mean, but social media has actually been a time sucker, right? Like you'll sit on TikTok for an hour
for sure, and
while your baby is starving, right? So
right. Wow.
And you're like, why?
Dude,
well,
we've really gone to one end that I was not expecting right now.
That's
all right.
My point is like AI, I think for the first time, a technology that can't be, it will try to be manipulated by, I think, the powers that be, obviously the guys that make money on ads, and everybody will try to figure out a way to put clicks and scroll and hearts and likes and all that into it. But the bottom line is I think it has a higher potential of permeating and being this new ether that we will basically be able to get that time back. So, everybody talks about why, when you're afraid of technology or you're excited about technology, I think if you center your thinking around that, and it kind of nicely, hedges into what you were saying, like, hey, if you've got a 5-minute task that you don't want to do anymore on every day, or if you spend 30 minutes doing this thing and you can automate it with AI, and that adds up, week to week, month to month, and you start to get your time back. And I think that's where a lot of people are just struggling right now, because they're like, even if you're successful in life, you're like, I'm killing myself at work. I'm barely getting home. I have no time to spend with my kids. I can't enjoy myself, and I'm struggling. Even if I wanted to do like a side gig or find another opportunity or grow my business, I don't have the energy and time to do it. And I also don't necessarily have the money to go, or the luxury to hire somebody to do these things for me. Right.
Right. Yeah. No, the one more thing, right? Like, I just don't have bandwidth for one more thing.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. That experience is real. And we've all, it's just exploded over the last, certainly, I just think about the pace of business in the last 26 years, right? In residential real estate, how quickly it's changed.
I don't even know how we did business back when it was just fax.
Right.
Like, we had like mail contract, like 2 weeks. I'll get to that contract in 2 weeks.
Right.
I think we're headed toward I don't want to end dark again, but like, I think we are like literally heading toward this cliff of like, we're just burned out as humans. We're not able to process this. I don't even know how these companies are continuing to grow infinitely. So there's got to be. I don't
think it's a cliff. I'll put a little sunshine in your darkness. Good. Yeah. I don't think it's a cliff. I think it's and I don't think it's a revolution, but I'll say an evolution. Yeah. Where, like, I've got a 12-year-old little girl, and when I talk to kids now, like, they're more grounded and are they think about things very differently than I thought about things when I was their age. And I think there's this movement back to time being the most important measurable in your life, not money or cars. And there's always aspirational, and that piece won't go away. But I hear more discussion around quality of life and time and that sort of thing. I
agree. And my kids are the same. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just us old farts that
exactly. and that generation is going to accept AI with that in mind. Yeah. And that's why it's going to work, because they're going to say, they're not fighting some change. They're not going, I don't want to give this over to AI. I don't trust it. I don't want it to do all this work that I should be doing, because I'm afraid of X, Y, and Z happening. They're going to willingly say, if AI could do that, no problem, because I never wanted to do it anyway. And then they're going to be like the happiest generation ever. And we're going to be sitting there as old men kind of going, reveling about these podcasts we used to do.
I'll be the slightly younger old man.
Yes. Can I give one public service announcement before we wrap?
Yes.
Right. So, to Rich's point earlier, if you have an opinion about AI and you haven't tried to build a little silly AI bot in some safe corner of your world, then you have an uninformed opinion about AI.
Ooh,
and
hot take.
What I would encourage everyone to do is to figure out I don't care if it's your grocery list, figure out some little sliver of your life where you could apply artificial intelligence to it and have a real experience with it, because otherwise you don't know what you're talking about. And you can be a skeptic, you can hold your opinions all you want, but find a little sliver of your life, personally or professionally, where you can implement AI in a real way, and then see what happens. If you hate it, awesome. And you still want to this is the end of the world, I salute you and respect you for testing the thesis. My intuition is if you do that, you're going to discover something very, very different.
You took us from fire and brimstone right back to sunshine and rainbows, and
Hey, that's what we do.
no one can do it like
here.
Keith. That's the whole reason we had you here. The last couple episodes you might not have heard got real dark with Rich, so I'm glad you
that's all right.
pulled him back to the light.
I like to mix it up. I like to mix it up.
The duality of life. Both
Exactly.
are important.
Well, this has been awesome.
Yeah,
thanks for having me, guys.
Keith, thanks so much for coming in. For everyone listening, thank you again for joining us on this episode. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button to stay in touch. Also, feel free to check out our Substack for more content, which will be linked to this episode to continue the discussion. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and we'll see you on the next episode. Take care, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Takes the flow, Leah Rich on the mic, ready to explore.